Happy Lent, everyone.
Happy Lent.
Hope you're really taking this time to, I like that phrase in tonight's intercessions, that we restrain the passions of the body, the desires of the body, that we may hear the Lord better, is that idea. There's an old expression: when you overindulge the body, you starve the soul. If you pay too much attention to the physical, you do so at the detriment of the spirit. I think that that's a very true statement. Contrary-wise, I think it's true that when we take the time to fast and abstain and pray and give alms, what we're doing is that we're giving up our attachment to ourselves in this world, and as a result, we enhance the soul. If we give attention to what we are doing, I think that that's important as well. Because you can fast on a diet, and it means nothing as far as interior progression. So it's not enough, if you will, to just give up something. It's also important to put in, to enhance, use that time, use that focus to enhance your spiritual walk. And this is the perfect time to do it. I do want to take a few moments and go over this image. I found this on the net. I thought it was very appropriate. And at the same time, does anyone know where this image comes from?
The Turin.
It's the Shroud of Turin. And this is the back side, also known as the dorsal side. We spend most of the time looking at the front, which is the face of Jesus. This would be the back. And what's interesting about it is a couple of things. I don't have the full, because I wanted to focus mainly on the back. But you can see, even in this image, that there are like stroke marks this way, and there are some that are this way. If we are to assume that the image on the shroud is Jesus, let's assume that for now, then what this shows is that these are whip marks. It's very clear that they're whip marks, and they're more than just straps, like leather straps, like you would whip a horse. Apparently, these were what are called Roman flagellum, which have little ball bearings in them, usually of sharp metal or broken glass or something like that on the end. So and it's on like a leather thong, and so it hits the skin, and then when it comes off, it rips the skin right off. People who have analyzed the picture of the shroud estimate that there are over 120 lash marks on this man's body that start from the base of the neck and go all the way down to his ankles. You also note here around the shoulder areas, there are huge abrasions that are on here, which implies that there was something that was pressed or something that fell on him at this time. People speculate that this implies that this is when he was carrying the cross. That it wasn't, as we've seen in traditional pictures like this, but it was basically the cross beam part, which is called the stipes, that was draped across his back, and he was carrying it like this. And it implies that at some point it was either dropped or fell upon him, which could imply when Jesus stumbled on the way to the cross. What I also find interesting are two little details about this that most people kind of overlook in this image. One is this. This is the back of the head. This around here indicates that there were puncture wounds on the scalp, all over the scalp. But this is the backside, and this here seems to be a pigtail. very long pigtail, like a braid that he had that goes all the way down to the middle of his back. Very interesting. Because traditional pictures of Jesus do show him with like long hair, but it's usually shoulder length. So if this was a forgery, someone came up with a very unique forge. No one would have thought to give Jesus a pigtail. I just put that out there. The other thing that's unusual about this image is that it's nude. It's nude. The hands are draped discreetly over the figure's body, but on the back there is no covering. So this idea that Jesus has this like loincloth is an artist's conception. Whoever this man was, when he was scourged nude. Because these abrasions, like I said, go from the back of the neck all the way down to the ankles. You see these same little marks, which tells me the level of humiliation that Jesus went through. And most likely, when Jesus was crucified, he was also crucified nude. Which makes sense to me because the first man, Adam, was naked in the garden, was he not? Naked and not ashamed in his original state. When sin came in, that's when they covered themselves. It makes sense that the second man was put to shame, if you will, humiliated. I mean, you can't do anything about it. You're nailed to the cross and you're, if you will, laid bare to the world for people to mock and ridicule and so forth. And to me, that just shows another level. If we assume this is true, and there's all the kind of blah, 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 whatever. To me, I think that this is an authentic relic for multiple reasons. But if it is, then again, this is something that a forger wouldn't have done, especially in the Middle Ages, because we've seen, even in our modern images, Jesus is always covered discreetly. You know what I mean? So if this is a forgery, then someone decided to throw that out and do something very, if you will. You hear what I'm saying? There are certain things that if this were a forgery, people wouldn't have done. Just because of the times that they were in, the Middle Ages. And we can go on and on about this. I think that I've always been fascinated with the shroud, even when I was a Protestant. And it's just extraordinary the amount of information that's on here. But I've heard Pope Benedict talk about the meditation on the shroud is a meditation on the passion of Jesus. And so I thought, what better way to begin this meditation on the passion than to show the different parts of the passion. And at times when I pray my sorrowful mysteries, I think of the shroud and meditate on these kinds of details that are on there. Because if it is Jesus, I personally believe it is, I think that this is a relic of Jesus' death, then it's a remarkable insight into the kind of torture and humiliation and et cetera, that Jesus went through for us in order to save our souls and to redeem the world. As I've been saying, it's not just getting our sorry souls into heaven. That's a part of it, to be sure. But there's a bigger picture here that Jesus is doing. And the bigger picture is redeeming the world. The universe has been forever changed because of this act, this week of Jesus' life that we are marching towards in Lent, that we are following Jesus in towards that time. And this year, like I did last year, when we get the week before Passion Week, I'm going to go over what happened on a day-by-day basis, because the Gospels tell us more about the last week of Jesus' life than we know about anything else about his other 30 years that he lived here on this earth. We know more about what happened to him in the last 8 days of his life than we do about the 30 years prior to that, put together. Which means that this is the most important week of human history. When God became man and sacrificed himself out of love for us to show us what love is, to redeem us and to bring us back into communion with him. It's extraordinary. It really is. So I just wanted to point that out, and perhaps even before Passion Week, before I go into that, I'd like to share with you again some of the videos. I think I did that last year about the Shroud of Turin, but I know we have lots of new people. And just talk about the history and so forth, of where it comes from. It's an extraordinary relic, if you ask me. It's extraordinary. And say what you will, oh, it's a medieval forgery. Oh, okay, so it's a medieval forgery. How did it get on there? How? Well, it was done in the Middle Ages. All right, fine. It was done in the Middle Ages. How did they do it? That's one question that we cannot answer about this. All the tests, all the carbon dating, all of the blah, 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 fill in the blank. Fine, it's a forgery. How did they do it? Because we can't do it today. We can't make this same thing over again. Do you realize that? We cannot duplicate things. Today, we cannot do it. We come close. There have been different tests. And it comes close, but it's not the same. You know what I mean? It's not something that's, it's not the same. It's just not the same. You're right, we can make some sort of replication of it, but no, it's not. So if they, fine, it's a medieval forgery, fine, tell me how they did it. Can't answer that. Can't answer that. Well, if we can't answer that, then we're back to where we started from. Where did this come from, and how was it made? So just something to ponder. Just something to ponder for that. I think the evidence is far more in believing that it's an actual relic of Jesus that he left behind for us than, oh yeah, it's medieval forgery. It's a fake. It's a fake. For gullible people to believe in. It was made in the Middle Ages. Carbon-14 dating says so. End of story. Close the book.
When was it found?
When? The first recordings we have of the shroud being in existence come from the, if I'm not mistaken, the 15th century, when the first display of it was done. But the actual history of it goes all the way back at least until the 9th century in Byzantine Christianity.
And it was found in Turin, obviously.
It was delivered to Turin. It was actually originally in Savoy, France. That's where the first display of it was done, that we have records of. It was in Savoy, France. It later migrated into Turin, where it is now.
Do we know when it got to Savoy?
No. There's a bit of speculation on that, and it takes a little bit, it's a history. And rather than go into it now, I'd rather have you see the documentary on it, which explains it a lot more thoroughly and more succinctly than I could right now. But save it to say, the short answer is the Duke of Savoy was related to the Knights Templar, who were a part of the raiding parties of Constantinople, which most likely grabbed this, which was then called the napkin, I believe, because it was said to be just a face cloth. and later it traveled from the sacking of Constantinople to Savoy, France, where it was then displayed and so forth. But I believe that this napkin that had a face, that's all it did, in Byzantine Christianity, is the same thing. It was just folded. And again, and where did they get it? Well, it came through the king of Edessa. Who's Odessa? Odessa is on the southern part of Turkey, who was said to have been healed by its power that was delivered by an early Christian missionary who had a custodianship of it. And so that's the connection from Palestine to Turin. That's a short, brief history of it. So anyway, it's fascinating, and when you really get into the history of it, it's extraordinary. That it's even still around. It's remarkable. It's survived 2 fires that we know of in its lifetime, and it's still here. Or even if it's a medieval cloth, it probably should have disintegrated years ago because of that. 2 fires it survived. So there's something extraordinary about it. So anyway, you don't want to spend too much time on that. Let's move on to tonight's topic, which is the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And where are we taking this? I forgot to set up my Bible, but I will set it up right now. We are looking at Revelation chapter 20. We're looking specifically at the first 4 verses. If you remember, chapter 19 ended with the bride, the bridegroom, and the defeat of the false prophet and the Antichrist. Then after that, we launch into this. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain. He seized the dragon